Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad and on Instagram, Movies TV Mad X. A very warm welcome to Saturday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. Today we talk about how Superman has been done dirty in film since Superman 3. So it could be a very controversial topic. Now, this doesn't mean that I hate Superman 3 or despise Superman 4 or Superman Returns, Man of Steel, BVS, Justice League. But I still think that the films that Superman's been in since Superman 3 haven't been with Superman's best interests at heart. And in the end, he has been done dirty. And every time everyone has an issue with Superman on film, WB or Canon, who were the ones who produced Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, blame the character. America has had enough of Superman. He's too powerful. He's too difficult to write. No, he isn't. You, Hollywood, are the problem. And I think when we look at Superman on television, I don't think there's a real issue there. You can argue that Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, doesn't have the greatest of production values, but back then they didn't put much money in television shows. So I think that I could bring 1 million people who love the Lois and Clark show. The George Reeves show was outstanding for the time and did Superman well. And I think that Smallville is the Mount Rushmore of Superman on television. In fact, Smallville may be the Mount Rushmore for Superman in live action, full stop. And Superman and Lois is a very interesting show as well. So I don't think Superman on television is the real problem. But since Superman 3, I believe Superman's best interests haven't been put forward. I don't hate Superman 3. It's very entertaining. It's fun. Richard Pryor is brilliant in the movie, but even Richard Pryor didn't have a good time making that movie because he was shit scared of the flying. Now, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. As a 14-year-old boy going to see this movie, I actually had a really good time. I loved the beat-em-up element of the film. I loved seeing Superman versus Nuclear Man, but it was a dumb, stupid film. Canon reduced the budget, but I do believe that Christopher Reeve, who had the idea to tackle the topical issue of nuclear disarmament, had grabbed hold of something very interesting. Superman 4: The Quest for Peace was Christopher Reeve's final appearance as Superman, and tragically, it's his worst appearance as Superman because the budget was reduced. Because basically, the people at Canon were a bunch of used car salesmen. The director of Masters of the Universe 1987 had to fund the movie in the end just to get it finished. And I have a soft spot for Masters of the Universe 1987. But, Superman 4: The Quest for Peace could have done a deep dive at nuclear disarmament. Superman getting involved with nuclear disarmament. We get the whole topical discussion as well in Batman versus Superman, where Holly Hunter's senator is asking the question, should Superman interfere unilaterally? It's an interesting question to ask about Superman in a modern contemporary movie. I believe BVS did a good job. We'll get to BVS a little bit later on, but I want to focus on Quest for Peace for now. Quest for Peace could have been the Logan of the Christopher Reeve movies. It could have been a 3-hour epic, really tackling the discussion of nuclear disarmament. Because back then, we were under threat from Russia nuking us, and us nuking Russia. So the residents of Russia and the residents of the West were scared that each leader was going to nuke the other. That was the reality we lived under in the 80s. I'm not joking. That was a reality. So it was a very interesting topic for Christopher Reeve's Superman to get involved with. But in the end, it was just a silly film. Superman putting nuclear weapons in a net, tossing them over his shoulder and throwing them into the sun. Something tells me if somebody did that in real life, and they wouldn't be able to unless they had superpowers like Superman, I think we'd all be flipping dead anyway, right? He's tossing nuclear weapons into the fucking sun. It's ridiculous, right? But that film could have been, as I say, a deep dive. Christopher Reeve's Logan of his Superman era. It could have been amazing. It could have been deep. It really could have had something interesting to say. When Christopher Reeve gave Tom Mankiewicz a call, and if you don't know who Tom is, he wrote the story and screenplay for Superman the movie, and Tom advised Chris not to get involved with any real world issues that Superman can't solve. Chris didn't listen. I don't necessarily agree with Tom's opinion here. I mean, I love Tom Mankiewicz. He's not with us anymore. The man was a genius, and Superman the movie is probably the best attempt at Superman on the big screen today. But I think there is a way that Superman in a 1987 movie called The Quest for Peace. Think about that title, The Quest for Peace. And it's an interesting title. Superman has a quest for peace. It would be amazing. They had a good idea about Superman addressing the UN. It's a beautiful moment. It's one of the moments of the movie that I think is truly genuine and beautiful, and I always cry. What's he going to say? Something wonderful, and he does, and it's brilliant. But there could have been a real, something real in this Superman movie being debated. Jason Momoa had the same vision for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and in the end, they shat all over his vision. This is what Hollywood do, especially today, because they have nothing, they have no confidence in boldness. Let's look, as I said yesterday, what are the CBMs making money today? Joker, a deep dive at a mentally ill man. The Batman, a deep dive into Batman. Both those films have made money and have been critically acclaimed. Now look at all the other DC movies and Marvel movies recently that are just plastic, bottomless pits of nothingness, right? So I think Superman 4 could have been a beautiful deep dive, but it was never going to happen with Canon Films. Was it now? A missed opportunity. So there, Superman was absolutely done dirty. Superman's best interests weren't put at heart. You may see me getting animated now, not as a cartoon, although that would be fun, but, angry that Superman's being done dirty in film. So Superman 3 really didn't do it. Superman 4 was a skeleton of a good idea that was done dirty. So we take 20 years off from Superman movies. In that time, we have Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. We have Smallville, as I've already said, the Mount Rushmore of Superman live action. But then, after 20 years, Bryan Singer, the critically acclaimed director of The Usual Suspects and both X-Men movies that were revolutionary. I have a lot of time for Bryan Singer as a director, not as a person, by the way. Don't get it twisted. Don't start talking about me. But as a director, Singer is a genius. But when he made Superman Returns, it's like he lost a lot of that genius. It was a bit weird. Superman Returns is a film with so many good elements. I don't hate Superman Returns. It's got brilliant moments. There's that return to Krypton sequence, which is a deleted scene. I always watch that scene before I watch the whole movie. Why would you cut that moment out? That moment depicts why Superman has gone away for 5 years and why he was willing to leave Lois Lane. In the novelization, Superman is fed a lie by an astronomer paid by Lex Luthor, and he's told that there's remains of Krypton out there, and that's why Superman goes out there. None of that's in the fucking movie. Why? That would have made it a better movie. In the end, Superman Returns has some excellent moments and not so excellent moments. As I say, Superman Returns is half good. It's never bad, but it's, when you look at the CGI, there's some beautiful CGI, but when he's flying at the end of the movie and a couple of other elements, it's bad CGI. It's the kind of renderings your first and your second attempts. And then your director tells you, no, do it better. That's shit. That's like your practice attempt. Anyway, so Superman Returns was accused of being boring, not having enough action. Well, a few years later, the studios say when it came to Man of Steel, they told Snyder, Nolan and Goyer, we want action. There wasn't enough action in Superman Returns. So what happened was, we went from barely having any action in Superman Returns to probably having too much action in Man of Steel. There's no question, Man of Steel, as I've said many a times, if you actually put Man of Steel if you put the best moments of Man of Steel and Superman Returns together, you've actually got a really, really good movie. Let's just jump back to Superman Returns for a moment. It's interesting today. There are Superman 78 graphic novels. You could literally have Brandon Routh in a limited HBO series, because Warner Brothers own HBO as well, doing Superman 78. Because he literally is playing Christopher Reeve's Superman in Superman Returns. You see, the idea of continuing the Donnerverse in Superman Returns isn't a bad idea. The problem is, it's the way it's done. It's the execution, because the Daily Planet and that Metropolis look nothing like Donner's Daily Planet and Metropolis. The Lois Lane, Kate Bosworth, she's a really good actor. I didn't have much of a problem with her, but she was the wrong casting to play Margot Kidder. And, this is the problem. If you're going to continue the Donnerverse, at least attempt to make it feel like the Donnerverse. It never felt like the Donnerverse. So it wasn't a bad idea if it was done properly. Anyway, let's jump back to Man of Steel. I like Man of Steel a hell of a lot. Christopher Nolan, David Goyer, the two men that gave us The Dark Knight. What could possibly go wrong? Zack Snyder directing it. Zack Snyder directs a brilliant movie. Man of Steel really isn't Zack Snyder's movie narratively, really. Visually, narratively, it is. But as I've said so many times when talking about Man of Steel, it really is Nolan, and especially Goyer's movie. But this is an attempt for a contemporary take at Superman. Goyer didn't like the idea of kryptonite. He thought kryptonite was a dumb idea, so he got rid of it. Right? And he wanted Lois Lane to know who Superman was. Fair enough, because it does make her look a bit dumb if she doesn't, I suppose. And a lot of good things came from Man of Steel. His worst idea was to have Superman break Zod's neck, because then you take that movie away from families and children. And if you don't have that moment in, as again I've said a billion times before, Man of Steel makes $1 billion, because Man of Steel is a great contemporary version of Superman in the 21st century, in 2013. But was Man of Steel putting, again, Superman's best interests at heart? I don't think so. I think it's a bunch of people who have opinions and have ideas about Superman. So it's okay to have a conflicted Superman in a movie, but you can't go too dark with him being conflicted. You can touch on it. There's no problem with that. And in the end, it divided audiences. Some people thought it was great. I think it's great. I could accept that version of Superman in 2013. I'm all right with that version of Superman in 2013. But the problem is, Superman is owned by Warner Brothers, so he can make the money. He makes the money to a point, but not enough money. So in the end, you lose the potential of making a Man of Steel 2, because the studio believe that Snyder, Goyer and Nolan are not commercially viable enough for them. But because Snyder already dived into BVS, because the studio got scared after the box office of Man of Steel. Let's bring Batman into the equation. So they do Batman versus Superman, which is a very, very interesting movie. A movie I adore. As a film, I fucking adore Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. Don't get it twisted. But again, Was Batman vs. Superman made with Superman's best interests at heart? I think in another video we'll ask if Batman vs. Superman was made with Batman's best interests at heart. We'll get into that another time. In terms of Superman's best interests at heart, no. Superman's best interests are not really served in Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. It's interesting to be asking if Superman should be involved with unilateral decisions. These are deep narratives, and interesting narratives again. The movie divided audiences more than Man of Steel did. You couldn't move on Twitter for a hot take about Batman vs. Superman. Batman vs. Superman was more controversial with its reaction than Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi. I remember the reaction to Batman vs. Superman. It was nuts. Half the people on movie Twitter loved it, half the movie fucking hated it. It made just under $1 billion, but oh boy, was it controversial. Now, is it really a controversial movie? Is it as controversial as having Superman snap Zod's neck? If you look at Batman and Superman, Batman is branding people. That's heavily controversial. Again, doesn't bother me that deeply. It's interesting. And in the end, Snyder's just trying to deconstruct these characters so he can reconstruct them by the end of the movie. The thing is, Batman is reconstructed by the end of the movie, and so is Superman. But then, when we get to Justice League 2, Superman is going to be controlled by the anti-life equation, and we're going to get we would have got a deeper bad Superman. So I don't think audiences, again, I find that all very interesting, I suppose, right? But again, isn't Superman being done dirty here? Because that's not really the Superman that we want to see in live action. Henry Cavill is a great actor. Physically, he looks like Superman, and really even Henry was done dirty with this way of going at things. Again, what Snyder was doing was interesting, bold, and stunning visually. I like what Snyder was doing, but it wasn't for everyone. And commercially, it was never, ever going to work. I think we all have to agree with that much. So, thus far, we have Superman 3, we have Superman 4, we have Superman Returns, we have Man of Steel, and we have BVS. For different reasons, they weren't embraced by the public and damaged Superman. So, after Batman vs. Superman, Snyder stepped away. They took his Justice League movie and splattered bright colours and bad gags in a movie we obviously not, let's say we're not nicknaming it in a nice way, but we've nicknamed Justice League. Justice League is a disgusting attempt to take somebody's art and destroy it and make it commercially viable. And guess what? Justice League wasn't commercially viable in the end because they gave him the same schedule to put out that movie that Zack was going to do. He only had a few months to do the reshoots and the rewrites. It didn't work. And in the end, I mean, it's interesting because Justice League makes around 650 million, about 20 million below Man of Steel. So I think, considering how bad Justice League is, that 650 million is a lot of fucking money for one of the most embarrassing moments in Hollywood and Warner Brothers history. We went on a journey as fans, fighting the system, Access Media to release the Snyder Cut, and we won. The people rose up, stood with a director, and we got that movie. Brilliant. I'll never forget it as long as I live. It was great to have this platform, Movies TV Mad, Big Mouth at the time, fight for that. But in the end, when you look at Justice League and the Snyder Cut, again, did they put forward Superman's best interests at heart? We get about, 10 minutes of Henry Cavill as Clark and Superman. I get it. We were going to get a lot more in Justice League 2 and Justice League 3. But ultimately, the true blue heroic Superman was going to rise up in the third act of Justice League 3. Is that enough for Superman? Doesn't Superman deserve better than that? So the question I'm asking you as fans, and this is not me getting at Snyder or anyone, doesn't Superman deserve better than Superman 3, Superman 4, Superman Returns, Man of Steel, BVS, Justice League, and the Snyder Cut? I love the Snyder Cut, but doesn't Superman deserve better than all of that? And then we get Superman in a cameo. Henry Cavill's Superman cameos in Black Adam in a post-credit scene. I think there Superman's interests were at heart. Despite Snyderverse stands being very angry that Lorne Balfe used John Williams' Superman theme, he did darken it up a little bit though. I thought it was a very interesting rendition of the theme. But ultimately, we can argue, since Superman the movie, that really Superman's, since after Superman the movie, I mean, Superman 2 is a great film, but the production problems with that movie and Donner being fired, and Donner being fired are the consequences that we've seen. Donner understood that you've just got to make Superman be Superman from the comics. Now, people will argue that Supes kills Zod, Non and Ursa in Superman 2. I really don't want to get into it because you don't actually see the man break anybody's fucking neck. At least if he did kill those three characters, it was done in a more family-friendly way, right? Who actually wants to see Superman break someone's fucking neck on television? Who's going to take their kids to see that? People will argue, well, this version, Zack had a go at Scott Mendelson, the movie and entertainment pundit, saying this is for adults, the Snyder Cut is for adults. Yes, it's for adults, Zack, but you were supposed to be making a franchise for the mainstream audience. And I know you don't give a shit about the mainstream audience, but that's what you were involved with. And in the end, you and Warner Brothers are both to blame for what happened, despite me loving you, Zack. Despite me thinking your movies are great. I'm a lover of Zack Snyder, not a hater. But I'm not actually sure that Snyder, Singer, or even Dick Lester with Superman 3 and the director of Superman 4, whose name escapes me, put Superman's best interests at heart. And I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. But for me, as a huge Superman fan, watching Superman the movie, the first superhero movie I ever saw, it's beautiful. It makes you feel like $1 million, and it makes Superman your hero. This is why Superman was relevant in the 70s and 80s and before we got any other movies, because they just, Siegel and Shuster, the creators of Superman, presented Dick Donner with a Superman statue at the premiere of Superman the movie. There's a reason for that. In fact, both those creators of Superman cried as they gave the award, which made Dick Donner cry as well. So the creators of Superman loved what Dick did because Dick stuck to the basics. It's as simple as that. You can try and contemporize Superman making darker, but it's never going to work for the general audience entirely. And that's the problem. If you want to make Superman Elseworld movies and the studio are fine with that, that's fine. I'm happy that Man of Steel and BVS and the Snyder Cut exist. They're some of my favourite films of all time. And in terms of superhero movies, as I said with Smallville, they're pretty close to the Mount Rushmore of comic book movies. But at the end of the day, we're asking the question today, was Superman's best interests there? Was it at the heart of the motivation of making any of those films since Superman 3? And I don't believe Superman's best interests were ever put first. And now we come to James Gunn. James Gunn must put Superman's best interests at heart. Now that is hard to judge at the moment without me knowing what Superman Legacy is. We know that Superman Legacy will have a living, breathing DC universe. That's exciting because James isn't just, making a Superman movie, he's introducing a brand new DC universe. So in having a Superman film with so many DC characters in it, again I ask you the question, are Superman's best interests being met in a film like that? Now, I don't want to prejudge that situation because I know nothing about this movie, not much. None of us do really, and we haven't seen the movie, we haven't even seen a trailer or haven't even read a novelization. So it's not fair to judge it. But I think it's fair to ask the question, if you've got a Superman movie with a living, breathing DC universe, could Superman's best interests be met and be served? I think they can, but again, it's all about that execution, everyone. But you've got to understand who Superman is. You've got to care about who Superman is. And at the end of the day, you know, you've got to like Superman. I hope that James Gunn likes Superman. I mean, he's always been the man for the underdog, for the lesser comic book characters. I'm not sure if he's a huge Superman fan, but you've got to understand who he is. This is the ultimate immigrant who's raised in Smallville with Midwestern values. He's very pure and he's very wholesome. James Gunn wants to actually use that. Superman being a good guy in a world that thinks good people are bad. How can you be that good? How can anyone be that good? You hear that all the time from Gen Z these days. And I think it's the type of question James wants to ask. That's a good way of going at Superman, because people have always said he's too powerful, he's too nice. For me, that's the reason I relate to him, because my parents were immigrants. I was racially abused at school. And when I came here on a holiday, everyone called me a foreigner. I live in Cyprus. So as a kid, I was a foreigner in Cyprus and in the UK. So in the end, I went, fuck nationality, fuck England when they play football. You think I'm a foreigner, why should I support your national team? And when I come to Cyprus, fuck Cyprus, because you see me as a foreigner, right? So I don't have a nationality, I'm just a human being. That's what I used to say as a kid, because I had enough of being rejected by both countries. And that's one of the reasons that Superman meant something to me as a kid, and he means something to me today. But I love the fact that he's got all these powers. I think it's cool that he has laser beams coming out of his eyes and he can fly and he's strong. And I love the fact that he's pure and he has a heart and he's kind, because I think that's important these days, because there's not enough kind and compassionate people. We have the Be Kind Brigade, the hashtag these days, who are not very kind. None of us are perfect. None of us are. The point is, I hear this thing on the internet, always be kind. No one, there's not one person on this planet who's always kind. It's not possible. But Superman is a fictional character and he tries to be as kind as he can. That's the point. He's raised as a human being, but it's very important as well in writing a Superman story to understand that ultimately he's not human. He feels human like me. I was a Greek, I have Greek Cypriot DNA, but I was brought up in the UK. So I think like an Englishman, not a Greek Cypriot. When I think in my head, I think in English. And Superman, he was brought up in an English-speaking country. He feels human, even though he's not. And most of the time, he's trying to reject his Kryptonian heritage. But when he finds out why he's sent, and when he hears from his biological father, he also embraces his Kryptonian side. And I think also with the Clark Kent disguise, that's him being human, right? And when he's Superman, he's embracing his Kryptonian heritage. I think you could write something deep about the dual basis of Superman's character. He's different when he's Clark Kent and he's different when he's Superman. I think that was my issue with the Dean Cain version of Superman. Clark Kent is too cool. It's not a disguise. Superman is cool, so is Clark Kent. That's why Reeve hunched Clark Kent down, put him with those, unfashionable glasses, made him trip over stuff. A lot of people today go, why is he doing that? That's dumb. It's not dumb. It's the ultimate disguise. If I didn't see Christopher Reeve Superman up close in that universe, I'd never think that Clark Kent was Superman. That's the point. So as I say, love to hear from you. You know, not only am I asking you to let me know, you know, if you feel Superman's been done dirty, especially commercially since Superman 3, and do you feel that finally James Gunn, you know, will be the director and the writer that does Superman justice on film?